always believed that motherhood was something the heart chose, not blood. Maybe that's why, for 30 years, I never reminded Daniel that I wasn't the woman who brought him into this world. Only the one who stayed. The one who fed him, cared for him, prayed for him, and held him through every fever, every heartbreak, every nightmare. But nothing prepared me for the day he looked me in the eyes and said I wasn't his real mother. It happened on a quiet afternoon. One of those afternoons that feel safe, peaceful, ordinary. I was in the kitchen, stirring the soup he'd loved since he was a little boy. Just the smell usually made him smile. I heard him walk in behind me, the soft thud of his shoes. But this time there was a strange heaviness in the air. Something cold. Something that didn't belong. "Mom," he said. His voice wasn't warm. It wasn't familiar. It was distant and unsure. I turned to him slowly. "Yes, sweetheart." He swallowed. His lips trembled slightly. Then he said the words that shattered 30 years of motherhood. "You're not my real mother." For a moment I didn't hear anything. Everything inside me just stopped. My hands froze mid-air, the spoon dripping soup onto the floor. I felt something inside my chest twist, like the ground underneath me had collapsed. I tried to speak, but my voice cracked. "Daniel, where is this coming from?" He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded paper. Letter. My heart clenched. I knew that paper. I had seen that handwriting once before, when he was too young to understand anything. A part of my past I buried so deep I prayed it would never come back. "She, my biological mother," he whispered, looking away. "She came to see me." The room spun. So that woman, she found him. After all these years. After everything she had done. "She told me the truth," he continued. "She said you stole me from her." Stole him. Me. I felt something burning behind my eyes. Could barely breathe. I slowly reached a hand toward him, but he stepped back. Only an inch, but it felt like 1,000 miles. "Daniel, please. Just listen." "No," his voice broke. "She gave me this letter. She told me to read it after talking to you." My throat tightened. My hands trembled. The letter was old. Yellowed at the edges, with creases so deep it looked like someone had folded and unfolded it 100 times. He placed it on the table without even looking at me. Like it didn't matter. Like I didn't matter. "I need to know the truth," he whispered. "Everything." And then he walked past me. His footsteps echoing like distant thunder. He didn't slam the door, but the soft click hurt more than any shout or punch ever could. I stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the letter. I felt tears fall warm and silent down my cheeks. How could she come back now? Why now? What did she want after all these years? I had raised him with every piece of love I had left in me. I had sat beside his bed through nights of fever, held him when bullies made him cry, celebrated every birthday, every small victory. I had sacrificed everything. My youth, my dreams, my health, just so he would feel safe. And now he doubted me. Because of her. With shaking hands I picked up the letter. The paper felt fragile, but the weight of it was crushing. I sat down slowly, barely able to steady my breath. My fingers trembled as I unfolded it. My eyes scanned the handwriting, and my heart dropped into darkness. Because the first line wasn't what I remembered. It wasn't what she wrote all those years ago. Well, something was wrong. Terribly, horribly wrong. Someone had changed the letter. There were lines, accusations, stories, lies designed to hurt me. Lies designed to turn Daniel against me. Lies only someone desperate would create. My chest tightened. Felt dizzy. A ringing filled my ears. Why would she do this? Why now? What does she want from my son? And then I saw it. One word. One sentence at the bottom. A sentence I didn't remember being there the first time. A sentence that made my heart stop cold. I'll come back for what's mine. My breath hitched. My hands went numb. My vision blurred. She wasn't here for love. She wasn't here for her son. She was here for something else. Something darker. Something I had spent 30 years protecting Daniel from. And the worst part. She had already gotten inside his head. I gripped the edge of the table to keep myself from collapsing. God, what are you planning? I whispered. Because one thing was clear. This wasn't the end. This was only the beginning. And whatever was coming next was going to tear our lives apart. The night after Daniel walked out of the kitchen, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that letter. Those words. That threat. I'll come back for what's mine. I didn't know which part hurt more, the sentence itself or the fact that Daniel believed it. The next morning, I sat alone at the dining table, the letter lying beside a half-cold cup of tea. The house felt heavier than ever before, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I kept thinking about him, my boy. His confused eyes. His trembling voice. The way he stepped back from me. Like I was a stranger. I pressed my palm against my chest. Hurt. Physically hurt. Just then I heard the front door creak open. My heart jumped. Daniel! I whispered. But the footsteps were softer. Ush's. Not his. When I stepped into the hallway, I froze. She stood there. The woman I prayed I'd never have to face again. Daniel's biological mother. Her hair wasn't like I remembered. Once wild and tangled from long nights and longer tempers. Now was styled smooth, neat. Her clothes were expensive. Too expensive for someone who used to show up hungry, broke, and desperate for money. Her lips curled into a cold, practiced smile. Hello, Margaret. My stomach dropped. What are you doing here? I whispered. She stepped further in without asking permission. Visiting my son, she said sweetly. Her eyes scanning the living room like she was inspecting a house she already owned. You remember him, don't you? My throat tightened. Your son, I said quietly. You left him. You abandoned him. She waved a hand dismissively. Mothers make mistakes. Mistakes. My voice cracked. He was 4. He cried for you every night. He didn't understand why you never came back. Her smile sharpened. Cold. Cutting. And yet, she said, tilting her head. He believes me more than he believes you. The words hit like a slap. I felt tears burn my eyes, but I refused to let them fall in front of her. What do you want? I asked. She took a slow step toward me. Isn't it obvious? She whispered. I want my place back. My son. His future. The inheritance he owes me. I stiffened. There it was. The truth behind the lies. It's not yours, I said firmly. Nothing of his is yours. She leaned in, her voice colder than winter. Oh, Margaret, it will be. He believes I regret what happened. He believes I'm back for love. He smirked. And now that he trusts me, he'll give me everything. I felt something inside me snap, not anger, not fear, but something deeper. Protectiveness. I had raised Daniel for 30 years. He was the child who clung to me during thunderstorms. The boy who held my hand in every school meeting. The young man who hugged me on graduation day. He was my whole life. And now this woman, this stranger, wanted to steal him from me with lies? No, I said, my voice trembling but steady. You won't manipulate him like that. She didn't blink, didn't flinch. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out another folded paper. My heart dropped. I found this at a very old place, she said softly. A place you thought no one would ever look. She held it up between her fingers. It's the real letter. The one I wrote before I left him. Before you took him. I felt my knees weaken. My breath caught. That's not true, I whispered. I didn't take him. You begged me to protect him from the man you were living with. You said he would kill you both. She cut me off sharply. Do you think Daniel will believe that? She snapped. Or will he believe the evidence I gave him? Evidence. Lies turned into evidence. She took a slow breath and smiled again, this time almost gently. You always thought raising him made you his mother. But blood wins in the end. My hands curled into fists. You're wrong, I whispered. Her eyes darkened. We'll see. Then she walked out, calmly, gracefully, as if she hadn't just torn my heart from my chest. The door closed behind her with a soft thud, and I fell to my knees, for the first time in years. Cried like a child, not because she had returned, not because she came for Daniel, but because, for the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't enough. I spent the whole afternoon in silence, trying to steady my breathing, trying to stop my hands from shaking. But nothing helped. My mind kept returning to the same question. What did she tell him? As the sun began to set, I heard a car pull into the driveway. My heart stopped. The door opened, and Daniel walked in. He didn't look angry. He didn't look cold. He looked broken. Mom, he whispered, his eyes red. I read the letter again. My pulse quickened. And he looked at me, really looked this time. There were things that didn't make sense. Things she said. Things she didn't say. I need to know the truth, Margaret. Hearing him use my name instead of Mom felt like a knife in my spine. I nodded slowly. Sit down, I whispered. There's something you need to know about the night she left you. He swallowed hard and sat across from me, his hands trembling. I took a deep breath. My heart raced. This was the moment I had avoided for 30 years. The truth he needed. The truth that would change everything. The truth that could either bring him back to me, or push him away forever. Daniel, I whispered, my voice barely steady. The night your biological mother left you, she wasn't running from me. Pause. She was running from someone else. Someone far worse. His breath hitched. His eyes widened. Who? He whispered. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling. Closed my eyes. And said the name I hoped he'd never have to hear. Your father. Daniel stared at me as though the air had been sucked from the room. His lips parted slightly, but no sound came. My father. The way he said it, shaken, confused, almost terrified, pierced my heart. I nodded slowly. Daniel, your biological father wasn't the man she told you he was. And he wasn't the man she wants you to believe now. His fingers tightened around the edge of the table. Then who was he? I felt a shiver run through me just hearing the question. Sit, I whispered. This isn't easy. And it isn't simple. He sank back into the chair, eyes fixed on me as though the truth were a storm he wasn't sure he could survive. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the memories rush in. Memories I'd buried so deeply I thought they'd never break through again. That night, 30 years ago, I wasn't always strong. There was a time when I was just a frightened young woman living in a small apartment above an old bakery, trying to make ends meet after failing to have children of my own. Every month had been another heartbreak. Every negative test a piece of my soul breaking all over again. I had almost given up on motherhood, until I met her. Daniel's biological mother. Back then she was barely 20. Pretty, fragile, full of wild dreams. And terrible decisions. She lived with a man who terrified everyone around him. A man with a temper so violent, neighbors heard screams through the thin walls. A man who was unpredictable, dangerous, and cruel. A man was Daniel's biological father. I found her one night outside my building, crying, shaking, bruised. She was clutching a tiny boy to her chest. Daniel. He was only 4. His tiny hands were gripping her shirt like he knew she was slipping away. I remember kneeling beside her. "Sweetheart, what happened?" She looked up at me, eyes swollen from crying. "Please help me. He's going to hurt him. He's going to hurt my baby." My blood went cold. "Your husband." She shook her head violently. "He's not my husband. I don't even know what he is anymore." Her voice cracked. "I need to leave him, but I can't take Daniel with me. He'll come after us. He'll kill me." She looked right into my eyes. "I need you to take him. Just for a while. Until I come back. Please. Please, Margaret." I remember the shock, the fear, the weight of her words crashing over me. "I don't understand. Why me?" "Because you're the only one who ever helped me," she whispered. "You're the only one who cares." Daniel looked up at me then, big brown eyes wet from crying. He didn't speak. He just reached toward me as though he felt something safe. And my heart broke for him, for both of them. I took him from her arms, gently, carefully. She kissed his forehead, tears falling onto his little cheeks. "I'll come back for you," she whispered. "I promise." But the promise was empty. I knew it even then. Her voice held fear, not commitment. She ran down the street, disappearing into the darkness. That was the night she left him. Not out of love, but out of desperation, fear, survival. But she didn't abandon him because she wanted freedom. She abandoned him because his father threatened to kill him. I became the only shield that child had left. Back to the present. Daniel's breathing grew heavy as he listened. "You're telling me my father was dangerous." "Dangerous isn't a big enough word," I whispered. "He was violent, unstable. And he hated Daniel from the moment he was born." Daniel blinked, stunned. "But she told me he was a good man. She said he died when I was a baby." I shook my head. She lied. She's always lied. But this lie, this one was meant to protect him. But then why come back now? Why tell me another version? I swallowed hard. "Because she thinks you're old enough now. Old enough to give her something." "Money," he whispered. He nodded. "She never came back for love, Daniel. She came back for gain." A painful silence filled the room. Then he asked the question I feared most. "What happened to him? To my father?" I looked at my hands. They were trembling again. "That night, after she left you with me, he came looking for her." Daniel's breath caught. "He came to your place." "Yes." My voice cracked with a memory. It was past midnight. Daniel was asleep in my arms. The bakery downstairs had closed hours before. And then, a thunderous pounding on my door. "Where is she? Where is my son?" Froze. Every muscle in my body turned to stone. The doorknob shook violently. He was trying to break it. Trying to break in. "Open the door. Open it, or I swear." Then something crashed against the wood. Maybe his shoulder. Maybe a weapon. I grabbed the phone. Hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. The police told me to stay quiet, stay inside, stay hidden. But they were too far. And he was too close. I hurried with Daniel into the bedroom closet. He was trembling in my arms. "Sure, baby," I whispered. "You're safe. I promise you're safe." The pounding grew louder. The whole apartment shook. Prayed. For the first time in years, I prayed with everything inside me. And then, silence. Terrifying silence. Minutes felt like hours. When the police finally arrived, they found him on the stairwell, drunk, furious, screaming threats. He was arrested, taken away, locked up. And Daniel slept through the entire thing, wrapped in my arms, unaware that his life had just been saved. I didn't know then that he'd never return, that he'd disappear into a life of crime and destruction, that he'd die years later during a violent altercation behind a bar. I found out long before she did, and I never told her. Because I knew the truth would break her. Or set her free in a way I wasn't ready for. But now she was using his ghost. Using lies. Using rewritten letters. To destroy everything I'd built with Daniel. In the present. A moment of truth. Daniel sat motionless. His eyes glossy with shock and pain. She never told me any of this, he whispered. She wouldn't, I said gently. Because the truth makes her choices look real. Final. And she doesn't want responsibility. She wants control. He swallowed hard. And the letter she gave me. I shook my head. She replaced the real one. The real letter said something very different. Different. Daniel's voice trembled. What did it say? Closed my eyes. The words burned in my memory. She wrote that you deserved a chance at a normal life. Safe life. One she couldn't give you. Daniel's breath hitched. She said she was sorry. That she hoped you would grow up with kindness. She said she didn't want you raised in fear. I wiped a tear from my cheek. But the part she hid, the part she changed, was the most important line. What line? I looked right at him. She wrote, if Margaret is willing, let her raise him. She will be a better mother than I can ever be. Daniel's eyes widened. He covered his mouth. That was in the original. Yes. Why didn't you show me? My heart cracked. Because you were too young. And later. I didn't want you to feel abandoned. He dropped his face into his hands. His shoulders shook. And for a moment, neither of us spoke. A knock at the door. Not gentle. Not polite. Low. Deliberate. Heavy. We both looked toward the hallway. Daniel's face paled. Is it her? The knocking grew louder. I felt the hairs on my arms rise. No, I whispered. This isn't her. Something in my stomach twisted sharply. Whoever was at the door wasn't here for casual conversation. There was weight in those knocks. A warning. Threat. Daniel stood slowly. I'll see who it is. No, I grabbed his arm. Let me. I walked toward the door, heart pounding as though it wanted to break free from my chest. The knocking stopped. I placed my hand on the doorknob, took a breath, and opened it. At first I saw only his shoes. Dark, muddy, heavy like work boots. Then my eyes moved upward, and my heart stopped. His face was older, worn, scarred, but unmistakable. No, I whispered, stumbling back. Daniel rushed behind me. Mom, who is? But before he could finish, the man stepped into the light of the doorway, and I heard the voice I prayed I'd never hear again. Well, he said, smirking coldly. Looks like you've been telling stories about me. Daniel froze. Confused. Terrified. I felt my world spin. 'Cause standing there, smiling like death himself, was the man Daniel believed was dead. His biological father. Alive. Back. I could feel it the moment Daniel walked into the house that evening. Something in him had shifted. His footsteps were heavier, his eyes dimmer, and the way he avoided looking at me, it stabbed straight through my chest. He placed his keys on the table quietly. No greeting. No tired smile. Not even the forced, polite warmth he'd been giving me lately. Just silence. I wiped my hands on the kitchen towel and stepped toward him gently. Danny, I whispered. What happened? For a long moment he didn't answer. He simply stood there, shoulders hunched, breathing slow like he was carrying a mountain on his back. Then he finally raised his head. And for the first time ever, my son looked at me like he wasn't sure who I really was. It's nothing, he muttered. But his voice cracked, and I heard it. Because a mother always hears what the world can't. Did she meet you today? Asked softly. His jaw tightened. Just a small movement, but it told me everything. Rebecca. She was digging her claws deeper. And deeper. Daniel sighed and rubbed his forehead as if trying to stop a headache. She left a message for me, he said. On my car. My heart skipped. What kind of message? He didn't answer. He simply walked past me, collapsed onto the sofa, and let out a shaky breath. She wants to meet again, he whispered. And she says she has more to tell me. That sentence felt like a knife turning inside my ribs. More to tell. More poison to drip into his ears. More lies to twist his heart. I sat beside him slowly, afraid that even my nearness might break him. Danny, I said carefully, you don't owe her anything. He looked at me then, really looked, and his eyes shone with conflict, fear, and something like guilt. But what if I owe her the truth, he murmured. That one sentence. It nearly shattered me. He was slipping. Not because he loved her, but because he didn't know what to believe anymore. And Rebecca was exploiting that. Did she tell you something? Yes. My voice barely held together. He hesitated. Mom, he whispered. She said you're hiding something from me. My blood ran cold. Rebecca was moving faster than I thought. And she said, he continued shakily, that you kept some things from my childhood a secret. My fingers trembled. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to stay steady. Daniel. Every parent has things they don't want their child to relive. He nodded slowly. I know, he whispered. But she said. He stopped. His lips pressed tightly. I leaned closer, bracing myself. What did she say? He hesitated, then finally let the words fall out. She said you kept a letter from me. My heart stopped. The room tilted. The air thickened. I felt the world slip from beneath my feet. Letter. She told him about the letter. But how? How could she possibly know? No one knew about it except me. And her. Only two people existed on this earth who knew the truth inside that envelope. Daniel didn't notice my shock. He was lost in his own storm. She said you've been keeping parts of my childhood hidden, he said. That you didn't want me to know how she actually felt about me. Or you. The bile rose in my throat. Rebecca wasn't just pushing him, she was setting a trap. Daniel ran his hands over his face. I don't know what to believe anymore, he whispered. You raised me, you protected me. But what if she's right? What if you've been hiding things to protect yourself, not me? It hurt. Not because he doubted me, he was human, confused, wounded. It hurt because Rebecca was manipulating him exactly the way she used to manipulate me decades ago. Danny, I whispered brokenly. I've never hidden anything to protect myself. He looked up at me with teary eyes. Then tell me, Mom. Tell me what happened before you rescued me. Tell me what she did. Tell me about the letter. Tell me everything you've never said. The room filled with silence so heavy it felt alive. This was the moment. The moment I had avoided for decades. The moment I knew would come, but prayed never would. My throat tightened as memories I had buried deep clawed their way back to the surface. Daniel waited. Quiet. Hurting. Needing answers I wasn't sure I was strong enough to give. Finally I took a deep breath. I wasn't planning to show you the letter yet, I whispered. Because once you read it, you can't unread it. His breath hitched. What does it say? He asked. I shook my head. It's not the words, Danny. It's the truth behind them. His eyes locked onto mine, desperate, scared. Mom, please. And then, right as I opened my mouth to speak, my phone buzzed. I flinched at the loud vibration cutting through the silence. Daniel frowned. Who's texting you this late? I didn't know. I picked up the phone expecting a spam message. But my blood froze. The text was short. 6 words. From an unknown number. You can't hide it forever, Maggie. My fingers went numb. Daniel saw my reaction instantly. Mom, he asked, voice trembling. Who is it? I didn't answer. The phone buzzed again. Second message. He deserves the truth. My heart slammed against my ribs. Daniel stood up slowly, eyes wide. Mom, who is texting you? I swallowed hard, every cell in my body screaming. It's her, I whispered, voice shaking. It's Rebecca. Daniel stepped back, shocked, terrified, angry. She has your number. Since when? I shook my head helplessly. I don't know. She must have found it recently. She's been getting closer, watching more closely, The phone buzzed again. Daniel snatched it from my hand and read the third message aloud. You told him nothing. So I will tell him everything. He sucked in a sharp breath. Oh my God. My legs weakened. This wasn't a warning. This was a threat. Rebecca wasn't just appearing in Daniel's life. She was stalking mine. Before Daniel could say another word, my phone rang. No caller ID. The ringtone echoed through the house like a scream. Daniel looked at me. I looked at him. Neither of us moved. The phone continued ringing, loud, shrill, merciless. Finally, Daniel whispered, Mom, answer it. My hands trembled violently as I picked up the phone. I pressed it to my ear. A familiar voice, cold, soft, twisted with false sweetness. Hello, Margaret. My blood ran like ice. Rebecca. I heard, she whispered, that you're finally telling him. Daniel froze beside me. I couldn't speak. Rebecca continued, voice smooth as poison. But don't worry. I'll help. She paused, then let out a quiet laugh. After all, I remember more than you do. The line went dead. Daniel stared at me, horrified. Mom, what does she mean? What is she talking about? What is she going to tell me? Tears blurred my vision. I grabbed his hands tightly. Danny! My voice cracked. You're about to learn a truth that will change everything you believe about her. And maybe even about me. He stepped closer, gripping my shoulders. I'm ready, he whispered. Whatever it is, just tell me. But I shook my head. No, not here. Not tonight. His face fell. Why? I swallowed hard. Because once I start, there's no stopping. And what you're going to hear is darker than you're prepared for. He stared at me, confused, scared. Then I whispered the words that made his entire body tense. Danny, you weren't just abandoned. He blinked. What? I looked into his eyes, my son's eyes, and felt mine fill with tears. You were. My voice broke. You were left to die. The room fell silent. Daniel's breath stopped. And the world shifted forever. The box felt heavier than it should have been. The moment Daniel opened it, I saw the shock on his face, the confusion spreading through his features like a storm about to break. I knew what he would find inside. I knew the pain it would cause him, but there was no turning back now. The old, dusty box that had been locked away in the attic for years, decades even, held the answers. Answers that I had kept hidden from him, not because I wanted to lie, but because I wanted to protect him from the truth that would change everything. I had always told myself I would never let him see it. But now there was no choice. The truth had already begun to unravel. Daniel gingerly pulled out a stack of yellowed papers from the box, his fingers trembling as he flipped through them, his eyes scanning the pages faster than I could process. What is all this? He whispered, more to himself than to me. I closed my eyes, bracing myself for what I knew was coming. Just put it down for a moment, I said, my voice strained. I don't want you to see everything all at once, Daniel. He didn't listen. He couldn't. He was too deep into the contents now, too invested. And I could see it. I could see the shock building in his eyes as he flipped through medical records, court papers, and photographs. Photographs of me. Photographs of him, but not the way he remembered. The ones I had hidden for so long. Finally, His hand shook and dropped the papers onto the table, his face pale. "Mom!" His voice trembled. "What is this? Why didn't you tell me?" I couldn't look at him directly. Not yet. I turned away, my hands clenched tightly in my lap. "Daniel," I whispered. "There are things a mother should never let her child know. There are things I thought you would never need to know." He stood up abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the wooden floor. "No," he snapped. "You didn't just protect me, did you? You kept this from me because you were afraid I would hate you." I turned around sharply, my heart pounding in my chest. I had never seen him this angry, this broken. He had always trusted me, always believed in me. And now this was happening. "Daniel, no," I whispered. "I didn't want you to see this because it's not the kind of truth a child should bear. Some truths are too heavy, too much for anyone to carry." He took a step forward, his eyes still filled with confusion and anger. "Tell me then. What is this? Why didn't you tell me I had a real father? Why didn't you tell me about the man who—" He trailed off, his voice breaking as he picked up the medical papers again, scanning them for answers. I didn't need to read the papers. I knew exactly what they said. The adoption papers, the hospital records showing his birth, the abandonment forms from when his biological mother had left him in my care. I had kept them, hidden them in this box for so long, thinking that one day, I would have the courage to tell him the full story. But when you love someone as much as I loved him, you do anything to protect them from the truth. You want to know the truth, Daniel, I said softly, my voice breaking as I finally met his gaze. The truth is, your biological father didn't want you. He didn't even care if you lived or died. He hurt your mother. He hurt me. And he nearly destroyed everything I had built for you. Daniel's face grew darker. You said he was dead, he whispered. I nodded slowly, tears streaming down my face. He was dead to me, Danny. After everything he did, I wouldn't let him come back into our lives. But why? Why didn't you tell me the truth? He demanded, his voice sharp now, full of rage. Why did you keep this from me? I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I did what I had to do, Daniel. Keep you safe. To keep you away from him. He stepped closer, his fists clenched. But that's not an excuse, Mom. You kept me in the dark for my whole life. You made me think he was just some memory, someone I couldn't even remember. And now, his voice broke, his eyes filling with tears. Now I don't know who to trust. I wanted to reach out to him. I wanted to pull him into my arms and tell him that everything would be okay. But I knew it wouldn't be. Not after this. Danny, I whispered, my voice barely audible. I did this because I thought you were better off without knowing. Your real father was a monster. And when I found you, when I took you in and promised to raise you, I swore I would never let that man touch you. I didn't want you to live with that fear. He shook his head. But Mom, I deserve to know. I deserve to know where I came from. I deserve the truth. I felt my chest tighten as the guilt rushed back over me, flooding every inch of my body. You're right, I said quietly. You do deserve to know. But there are things that would have torn you apart. Things that would have made you hate me. Hate everything I did for you. I looked down at my trembling hands. I had never told him the full story, never told him how deep the pain ran. The sacrifices I made just to keep him away from his biological father, the things I hid from everyone, including him. But now, looking into his eyes, the same eyes that I had watched grow into a strong, caring young man, I realized something. He deserved to know. He deserved to see everything I had done for him, even if it meant facing my own guilt. The truth wasn't just in the box anymore. It was in us. It was in the way he was looking at me, hurt, angry, confused. And in the way I felt the weight of my past crushing me again. Daniel, I whispered, my voice shaking. Your father didn't care about you. He was dangerous. He threatened to kill you. And I had to protect you from him, no matter the cost. Daniel's expression faltered. The rage in his eyes began to fade as he slowly sank into the chair again, his body slumping with exhaustion. I don't know what to say, Mom. I sat beside him, feeling the weight of everything we had just uncovered. I'm sorry, I said quietly. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. But I wanted you to be safe. I wanted you to have a life, a future, away from all of this. I thought if you never knew, it would be easier. He looked at me, his eyes softening. I get it. But why didn't you just trust me? Why didn't you believe I could handle it? I swallowed, the guilt weighing heavily in my chest. Because I thought I was doing what was best for you. I thought I was protecting you. Daniel sat there in silence for a long while, the weight of the past hanging between us. The secrets, the lies, the sacrifices, everything we had hidden from each other. Finally he spoke. His voice was quieter now, more thoughtful. I don't know if I can forgive him, he whispered, looking down at the box. But I can try. For you. I nodded, unable to speak. I didn't need to say anything. We both knew the path ahead would be difficult. But together we could start to rebuild what had been broken. The days after the box were a blur. Nothing but a cloud of tension, silence, and emotional distance. Daniel had retreated to his room more often, and I could feel the weight of what I had told him pressing on his chest. He was carrying a burden he wasn't ready for. Neither of us were. But there was one thing I knew. He couldn't carry it alone. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. It was the morning after the box, after the letter, after everything. Daniel stood by the kitchen counter, his face pale, his eyes red from lack of sleep. I had never seen him look so lost. He was more than just confused. He was broken. Mom, he said quietly, almost hesitantly. I can't keep running away from this. I have to confront her. I stopped what I was doing, my hands frozen in midair. Confront her. I repeated, my voice trembling. Daniel, I don't think that's a good idea. Not now. You're not ready. But I knew. I knew he had to do it. The truth had been slowly suffocating him for days, and he couldn't hide from it any longer. I can't keep living with the questions, Mom. I need answers. I need to know why she did all of this. My heart twisted as I looked at him. My boy, the one I had protected with every ounce of my being, now standing on the edge of something that could tear him apart. I'm going to meet her, Daniel said. I'm going to find out everything she's been hiding. Everything she's lied about. His voice was firm, but I could hear the cracks in it. The fear, the uncertainty. I couldn't stop him. I knew that. You need to be careful, I whispered, a lump forming in my throat. Rebecca is dangerous. She has a way of twisting things, making you feel like everything you've known is a lie. Daniel looked at me, his face softening just slightly. I know, Mom, he said, his voice filled with sadness. But I have to do this. For me. For both of us. The words cut deep. I wanted to protect him forever. I wanted to wrap him in a blanket of safety and never let him go out into the world again, but I couldn't. I had to let him face the demons of his past, even if it meant seeing him hurt. Please be careful, I said, my voice trembling. And when you're ready to come back, know that I'll be here, no matter what happens. He nodded, his eyes filled with both determination and doubt. I will, Mom. The car ride to Rebecca's house was quiet. Too quiet. The tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating. Daniel kept glancing at me. His eyes filled with a mix of anger and confusion, and I could see the storm inside him brewing. You sure about this? I asked, my hands gripping the edge of the seat. He nodded without looking at me. I have to know. I took a deep breath, watching him carefully. My son. The one who had grown from a scared, innocent boy into this brave, yet broken man sitting beside me. And I couldn't help but feel guilty. So guilty. Because the world had hurt him, and I had hidden the worst part of it from him for so long. But I couldn't protect him forever. Not from this. We pulled up outside Rebecca's house. Small, well-kept, but with a cold, empty feel to it. I could see the faint outline of her figure behind the curtains in the window. She knew we were here. Daniel didn't hesitate. He opened the door and stepped out before I could say anything more. "Stay in the car, Mom," he said quietly before walking toward the front door. I wanted to follow him. I wanted to stop him, to take him back home where it was safe. But I didn't. I stayed there, my hands pressed tightly against the wheel, watching him disappear into that house. I knew he needed to do this. He needed to face the woman who had abandoned him, the woman who had left him in my care. But deep down I feared what might happen next. It felt like hours before Daniel finally came back to the car. His face was pale, his shoulders tense. When he opened the door, I could see it in his eyes, the pain, the confusion. But there was something else there too. "Daniel," I whispered. "What happened?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he just stared at me, as though he was seeing me for the first time again. He was broken in ways I couldn't understand. And I felt the same way, like everything I thought I knew was now shattered. His voice faltered, and for a moment I thought he might break down right there. But he swallowed hard and finally spoke. She told me everything." His voice cracked. "Everything I needed to hear." I reached out to him, but he pulled back slightly, wiping his eyes. "Daniel, please. Talk to me." "What did she say?" He took a deep breath and began to speak, but his words came out in a rush, like they were tumbling out of him whether he was ready or not. "She said it was never about me." "Not really." He shook his head, tears threatening to spill over. "She told me she left because she wanted to. That she never wanted me. That I was just a burden to her." My heart shattered for him. For both of us. "She said she hated me," he continued, his voice shaking with the weight of it all. "She said I ruined her life." I reached over and touched his arm, unable to stop the tears that welled up in my eyes. "Oh, Danny," I whispered, feeling like I was losing him all over again. "But she said something else too," he added, his voice low, almost like he was afraid to say it aloud. "She told me that you were the one who saved me. She said that if it weren't for you, I would have ended up like her." I looked at him, my breath caught in my throat. "She said you were my real mother," he whispered, his eyes searching mine. "And that I should never doubt that." I didn't know how to respond. All I could do was pull him into my arms and hold him as tightly as I could. I didn't know what the future held for us, or how we would heal from everything that had been said and done. But I knew one thing for certain. I was his mother, and nothing, no lie, no pain could ever take that away. As we drove home in silence, I felt the weight of everything settle between us, but this time it didn't feel like a burden. Felt like a promise. Daniel had learned the truth. The whole truth. And maybe, just maybe, we could begin again. The days that followed Daniel's confrontation with Rebecca were filled with silence, heavy and suffocating. We were two souls, both lost in the weight of the truths we had uncovered, each struggling to come to terms with the broken pieces of the life we had been living. It wasn't that Daniel was cold toward me. No. But he had become distant in a way I had never experienced before. He'd lock himself in his room for hours, only emerging for meals, his face unreadable. He barely spoke, and when he did, his voice sounded distant, almost as if the son I had raised was slipping through my fingers. I didn't know what to say to him. I didn't know how to fix the crack that had opened between us. There were no words that could make up for the years of lies, of secrets, of things I had kept from him in the name of love. I had protected him, yes. But now, in this silence, I couldn't help but wonder if I had hurt him more than I ever knew. One afternoon, I decided I couldn't take the quiet any longer. I couldn't wait for him to come to me because I knew he wouldn't. Not yet. Not until he was ready. I knocked gently on his door, even though I was certain he wouldn't answer. "Daniel," I called softly, my voice shaky. "Can we talk?" There was a long pause. For a moment I thought he might ignore me altogether. But then I heard the soft rustling from inside, followed by the creak of the door opening just enough for him to peek out. His eyes were tired, red from lack of sleep, but there was something else there, something softer. The hard shell he'd built up in the past few days was beginning to crack, and I could see that he was struggling to let go of whatever pain he was holding inside. "Mom," he said quietly, stepping back to let me in. I don't know what to say. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my shaking hands. "I don't know what to say either, Danny. But I need you to know something." He sat down on his bed, his hands resting on his knees. I could see the weight of everything on his shoulders, the burden of the truth he had just discovered, and the knowledge that his entire life had been built on lies. His biological mother, the woman who had abandoned him, who had never cared about him, was a stranger now. And yet, the damage she had done to him lingered. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," I began, sitting next to him. "About how I kept things from you. And I realized something." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine. "What?" he asked softly. "I kept secrets from you, Daniel," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "Not because I didn't trust you. Not because I wanted to lie to you. But because I was afraid of what would happen if you knew the truth. I thought I was protecting you. But in the end, I think I only hurt you." Daniel's lips parted as if he wanted to speak, but he didn't. Instead, he just looked at me with an expression that was equal parts confusion, pain, and something else I couldn't quite place. Regret, maybe. Or maybe the same guilt that I had been carrying. "Mom, I don't know what to feel right now," he said, his voice low. "I'm angry. I'm confused. But at the same time I feel." His words trailed off, and he shook his head as if he couldn't find the right way to finish the sentence. "Daniel," I said softly, "I know this is a lot. I know you're feeling all of these things. But I need you to hear me when I say this. Everything I did for you. I did it because I loved you." He blinked, his eyes glossing over as if he were fighting to keep the tears at bay. I could see the walls he had built around himself slowly crumbling. The truth was heavy on him, but I could see a part of him starting to forgive me. "I know you loved me," he said, his voice cracking. "But it hurts, Mom. It really hurts to know that you kept so much from me." "I know," I whispered, squeezing his hand. "And I'm so sorry." We sat there for a long time, just the two of us in the silence that had become so familiar, yet so foreign. The air between us was thick with unspoken words, but it was also filled with the hope that we could find a way to move forward. Finally, Daniel spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I feel like I don't even know who I am anymore," he said. "The person I thought I was, the family I thought I had, it's all so different now." I felt my heart break all over again for him. He was struggling to process everything, trying to piece together the fragments of his past. But deep down, I knew that no matter how painful it was, this was a necessary step. He had to face the truth, just as I had faced my own mistakes. "You don't have to have all the answers right now," I said gently. "You don't have to figure everything out today. Just take it one step at a time, Danny. And know that whatever you need, I'll be here. I'll always be here." He looked at me then, his eyes softening with something that resembled relief. "I just don't want to lose you, Mom." "You won't," I promised him, pulling him into a tight hug. "You'll never lose me." We stayed like that for a while, just holding each other, letting the weight of everything slowly lift from our shoulders. The tears that had been building in me finally broke free, but this time they weren't tears of guilt or regret. They were tears of release. After a few moments, Daniel pulled back slightly, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "I don't know if I can forgive her," he said, his voice quiet. "Rebecca. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive her for what she did. For lying to me my whole life." I nodded, understanding completely. Forgiveness doesn't come easily, Daniel. And it's not something that can be forced. You don't have to forgive her right now. You don't even have to forgive her at all, if that's not what you want. But you can forgive yourself. And you can move forward with your life, knowing that you are strong. You are enough. And you always have been. He gave me a small smile, but it was filled with so much pain. I could see the internal battle he was fighting, between the love he still had for a mother who had hurt him, and the overwhelming need to protect himself from the truth. "I just don't know where to start," he whispered. "You start with one step at a time," I said, brushing his hair back. "One step, Daniel. And I'll be here every step of the way." That evening, after everything had calmed down, Daniel surprised me. He sat down next to me on the couch, holding a small box in his hands. It was the box I had hidden away for so many years, the one that contained everything I had ever kept from him. The photographs, the letters, the truths I thought would break him. "I want to see it," he said quietly. His voice filled with a mixture of determination and fear. "I want to see everything. I want to know what you went through." I could feel the lump form in my throat as I nodded slowly. And just like that, the past began to unravel before us. The days after Daniel and I started piecing our lives back together felt like we were walking on fragile glass. There was no clear path, no easy way forward, but one thing was certain: we couldn't keep hiding from the truth. The lies, the secrets, everything that had been buried for so long had surfaced. And as painful as it was, we needed to face it head-on. But some truths, as I had learned, had the power to break you. I had never imagined that confronting Rebecca, the woman who had once been part of our lives, would lead us to the edge of a precipice. But it did. We were no longer just dealing with the past. We were dealing with her. That afternoon, Daniel came into the kitchen, his face drawn with exhaustion, his eyes still searching for answers he couldn't find. "Mom," he said quietly, "I think it's time." I looked up from the pot I was stirring, sensing that the weight of what he was about to say was heavier than anything we had spoken of before. "It's time to confront her," he said, his voice firm. "I need to see Rebecca one last time. I need to know the full truth. The things she left out, the lies she told me. I can't move forward until I hear it from her." My heart skipped a beat. I had been preparing for this moment, but now that it was here, I wasn't sure I was ready. "You don't have to do this, Danny," I whispered, my voice trembling. "You've already learned so much. You don't owe her anything." "I owe it to myself," he replied, his tone unwavering. "I have to face it. I need to see her, look her in the eyes, and hear the truth from her." I nodded slowly. I knew he had to do this, even though I feared for him. Confronting her would not bring closure. It would only open a floodgate of more pain. But I couldn't stop him. I could only stand by him and hope he found the strength to walk away when it was all over. We drove in silence. The car ride stretched out between us like a heavy fog. Neither of us spoke, but we didn't need to. The tension was enough. When we arrived at Rebecca's house, I could feel Daniel's pulse racing beside me. His hands were clenched into fists on his lap, his jaw tight with both anticipation and fear. I looked at him one last time before we got out of the car. His eyes were wide, reflecting the storm that had been brewing inside him for so long. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Daniel didn't respond immediately. He just nodded, his face hardening. I have to do this, Mom. I have to know. We walked up to the door of the small, seemingly innocent house that had once been a place of darkness and lies. The doorbell rang, breaking the eerie silence around us, and moments later the door opened. Rebecca stood there, her face as cold and emotionless as ever. Her eyes scanned Daniel, then flicked to me. There was no surprise, no emotion. She had known we were coming. It was almost as if she had been waiting for this moment. "Well, well," she said with a sly smile. "I didn't expect you so soon. I thought you might take a little longer to process the truth." Daniel stood there, silent for a moment. He was visibly trembling, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "I want to hear everything, Rebecca. Everything you've been hiding. I want to know what you really did." I stepped back, not wanting to intrude on this moment, but unable to tear myself away. I could see Daniel's resolve, his need for closure, and I knew that even though it would hurt, he had to face it. Rebecca stepped aside and motioned for us to come in. "Come on in," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "Let's talk. I'm sure there's much to discuss." We stepped into her house, and I immediately felt an overwhelming sense of unease. It wasn't the decor or the starkness of the walls. It was something else, an energy, a tension, something that didn't sit right in my gut. Daniel walked in first, his shoulders tense, his fists still clenched at his sides. He sat down at the small wooden table she had in her living room, and I followed, standing a few steps behind him, watching carefully. Rebecca closed the door slowly and took a seat opposite us. Her eyes narrowed as she looked directly at Daniel. "So you want to know the truth, huh?" she asked, a mockingly sweet smile curling on her lips. "Well, I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. You've already gotten the watered-down version from your dear mother." Daniel stiffened, but his voice remained calm. "I want to know everything. No more lies. No more games." Rebecca leaned back, her fingers drumming softly on the table. "All right, you want the truth. Fine." She paused, eyes flicking to me with a look I couldn't place. "Your real father, he was never the man you think he was. He wasn't a good guy. He wasn't the one I wanted him to be." I could feel Daniel's eyes snap to mine, searching for an answer to a question that still hung in the air. I looked away quickly, not knowing how to explain the complexity of her words. Rebecca continued, ignoring the silent tension building between us. "He was dangerous, Daniel. He wasn't just violent, he was psychotic," she said, her voice colder now. "And you were the one thing he could never control. You were my weakness." Her eyes locked onto Daniel's. "I never wanted you, Daniel. Never. But I didn't have a choice. When I got pregnant, I couldn't keep you. He wouldn't let me. He was the one who forced me to keep you. He made me raise you, but I hated every minute of it." Daniel's face hardened, and I could see the anger building in his eyes, but he remained silent. "He was going to take you away from me, Daniel," she continued, leaning forward. "I had no choice but to run. To leave you with her." Flinched. The bitterness in her voice stung deeper than I had expected. She was blaming me for taking her son away from her, for stealing him. "And don't think for a second that she didn't know what she was doing," Rebecca added, her eyes flicking to me. "She knew exactly what I was running from. And she wanted you. She didn't care about you. She cared about herself." Daniel stood up, the chair scraping against the floor. "That's enough." But Rebecca wasn't done. Her words were venom, and she was too far gone to stop now. "You think I'm the villain here. You think I'm the one who ruined your life," she hissed. "No, Daniel. She did. She's the one who lied to you. She's the one who kept you from me. She took you from me." Daniel stepped forward, his fists clenched. "No. You're the one who abandoned me. You're the one who left me to grow up without you, without any explanation. I spent my whole life thinking I was unwanted, and now I find out that you never wanted me to begin with. I stood up then, the pain of her words too much to bear. Daniel, please. Don't listen to her. But it was too late. The anger in Daniel's eyes was too strong now, and I could feel the gap widening between us once again. The truth was like a sharp knife cutting through everything we had built. Rebecca's smile returned. You can't change what's already been done, Daniel. You can't undo the past. The room was filled with silence for a moment. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. And then, as if on cue, Daniel turned to me, his eyes full of a raw, painful emotion. Why didn't you tell me? He whispered. My heart cracked, but I didn't answer. There were no more words left. The truth had already broken us. All that was left was to pick up the pieces. Rebecca stood up then, her eyes glittering with something I couldn't quite name. Well, that's that, she said coldly. I hope you both enjoy the rest of your perfect little lives. Daniel's chest heaved with anger, but he didn't say anything else. I could see the storm raging inside him. There was nothing left to say. As we turned to leave, Rebecca called after us one last time. You'll never escape what you are, Daniel. You'll always be my son. And I'll always be your mother. But I knew, deep down, that the only thing that mattered now was the future. Our future. And no matter what happened, I would protect Daniel with everything I had left. That was all that filled the car as Daniel and I drove away from Rebecca's house. No shouting. No crying. No questions. Just silence. The kind that feels heavy, suffocating, like there's a storm inside the car waiting to burst out at any second. I glanced at Daniel several times as I drove, but he didn't look back. His eyes were fixed on the road ahead, though I could tell he wasn't really seeing it. His hands rested motionless on his knees, but they trembled, barely noticeable unless you were looking closely. And I had been looking closely for years. Daniel, I finally whispered, unable to take the quiet any longer. He didn't respond, not even a blink. Daniel, I tried again, this time gently touching his arm. He flinched, not violently, not angrily, just instinctively, like he wasn't ready to be touched, like he was somewhere else entirely, somewhere painful. I withdrew my hand, my heart sinking. Do you want to talk? I asked quietly. Still nothing. So I stayed silent. Sometimes people need the quiet. Sometimes healing begins in the silence. But this silence felt different. This silence felt like he wasn't shutting out the world. He was shutting out me. We pulled into the driveway just as the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in strokes of pink and orange. A strangely peaceful backdrop for a world that had just shattered. Daniel stepped out of the car slowly, almost mechanically, and walked toward the house without a word. Not coldly, not rudely, just lost. I followed him inside, my chest tight with worry. Danny! I called softly as he headed toward his room. He paused for a moment, just a second, and then kept walking, closing the door gently behind him. Not a slam, not a snap, just a quiet click. And somehow, that tiny click hurt more than a slammed door ever could. I stood there for a long time, staring at his closed door, wondering, hurting, fearing, until I finally whispered to myself, he needs time. Just give him time. But time can be a terrifying thing when you don't know what it will bring. That night I couldn't sleep. I tossed, turned, tried to calm my own racing heart, but the events of the day replayed in my mind again and again. Rebecca's words, Daniel's expression when he heard them, and the question that had broken me completely. Why didn't you tell me? There were answers to that question, but none that could ease his pain. I had protected him, but in the process I had created new wounds. At around 2 a.m, I finally got up and walked quietly down the hallway. Daniel's room was dark, but the faint glow under the door told me he was still awake. My hand hovered in the air, ready to knock. But I stopped myself. Not tonight. Not while the wound was still fresh. Not when both of us were still bleeding inside. I let my hand fall, turned away, and went back to my room. The next morning, Daniel was already awake, sitting at the kitchen counter. His hair was a mess, his eyes tired, but there was a calmness in his face that hadn't been there last night. "Morning," I said softly. He nodded but didn't speak. I began making breakfast, something simple, just to fill the silence. The sizzle of the pan was the only sound between us. After a long moment, Daniel finally spoke. "I'm sorry about yesterday." His voice was low, strained, but sincere. "It's okay," I whispered. "You went through a lot." He nodded, staring at the table. Mom, can I ask you something?" Froze. He had called me Mom again. "Yes," I said, forcing myself to stay calm. "Anything." When she said those things, he hesitated. I could see the battle in his eyes. Fear, confusion, hope. Were any of them true? My breath caught. "Which things?" I asked carefully. "That you took me," he whispered. "That you wanted me for yourself. That you shouldn't have gotten involved." My heart cracked, but I didn't rush to deny it. He needed honesty, not comforting lies. "Daniel," I said slowly, "I didn't take you." He looked up at me, uncertainty in his eyes. "You were abandoned," I continued, my voice trembling. "Your father wasn't just violent. He was dangerous. And she, Rebecca, didn't care what happened to you. She was ready to let him take you." I swallowed hard. "She left you alone that night. She didn't look back. She didn't ask how you were. She didn't even ask if you were alive." Daniel's breath hitched. "I didn't steal you," I whispered. "I saved you. Because no one else would." He looked away then, his hand covering his mouth as if he were trying to hold back emotions too heavy to speak. "Why did you hide it from me?" he finally asked. I took a deep breath. This was the question that mattered. "Because I wanted you to build your own life," I said softly. "Free from the weight of what she did. Free from the darkness of your past. Free to be who you wanted to be, without feeling ashamed of where you came from." A tear slid down my cheek before I could stop it. "I never thought she would come back," I whispered. "I never thought she would hurt you again." He didn't respond. He just sat there, staring at the table, his chest rising and falling with deep, trembling breaths. And then, he whispered something so soft I almost missed it. "I believed her." I blinked. "What?" "I believed her when she said you kept me from her." His voice cracked. "I believed her when she said I wasn't yours." "Daniel." "No," he said, shaking his head. "Let me finish." He took a shaky breath. "I believed her because I was angry. I was scared. I didn't know what to think anymore. I felt like my entire life was built on a lie, and I didn't know who to trust. Not even myself." He turned to me then, his eyes glistening with tears. "But now I know she was lying. Now I know who really cared about me." The tear that had been waiting finally slipped down his cheek. "You," he whispered. "It was always you." I couldn't help it. I covered my face with one hand as the tears flowed. Years of fear, guilt, heartbreak, all pouring out at once. He reached across the table and took my hand. And for the first time in days, I felt my son return to me. But the peace didn't last. Because that afternoon, just when I thought we were finally stepping into the healing, there was a knock at the door. Loud, sharp knock. Daniel and I froze at the same time. "Are you expecting someone?" he asked. "No," I whispered. The knock came again, harder this time. Daniel stood, walking slowly toward the door, tension radiating off him. Followed my heart pounding. He opened the door and froze. My breath caught, because standing on our doorstep, was a police officer. And behind him was Rebecca. Her face twisted in anger, in triumph, in something dark and cold and vindictive. "Ma'am," the officer said, turning to me, "we received a report about you involving the kidnapping of a child 24 years ago." My stomach dropped. Daniel's face went pale. "Wah! No." He stepped forward, shaking his head. "That's not true. That's not what happened." Rebecca crossed her arms, a wicked smile on her face. "She stole you," she said calmly. "And I'm pressing charges." Everything went silent. Cold. Ill. The world seemed to tilt beneath me. Rebecca wasn't done. She leaned slightly forward, her voice dripping with venom as she whispered, "I warned you, Margaret. You should have stayed out of my life." The officer looked at me, serious and firm. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with us to answer some questions." Daniel grabbed my arm. "No. You're not taking her. She didn't do anything." "Daniel," I whispered, my voice cracking. "It's okay." But it wasn't. Nothing was okay. Because the past, our past, had just come crashing back with full force. And this time, it wasn't going to be a battle of emotions. It was going to be a battle of law, of truth, of who the world believed. And Rebecca was ready to destroy everything. I had spent years burying the truth, hiding from the darkness that had come with Rebecca and her twisted legacy. But now the darkness had returned, and it wasn't just an emotional weight anymore. It was real. The officer's words echoed in my mind. "I'm going to need you to come with us to answer some questions." I stood there, numb, not knowing how to react. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. How had this happened? How had Rebecca found a way to twist everything and turn it against me? She had never been this determined, this vindictive. But something in her had snapped. Daniel stepped between me and the officer, his body rigid, his face pale with shock and confusion. "No," he said, his voice tight. "She's not going anywhere. She didn't do anything wrong." But the officer didn't back down. "Sir, you need to let us do our job. We have a report and we're investigating a serious claim. We need to take her in for questioning." Daniel turned to me, his eyes wide. The pain in his gaze cut through me like a knife. "Mom, what's going on?" Rebecca stood just behind the officer, a faint smile playing on her lips, almost as if she were enjoying the chaos she had created. "Tell him, Margaret," she said, her voice dripping with malice. "Tell him the truth. Tell him why you've been hiding all these years." I could feel the weight of her words crashing down on me. I had been protecting him from everything, including the woman standing right in front of us. But in trying to shield him, had I ruined everything? Was I about to lose him all over again? I swallowed, my throat dry. "Daniel," I whispered, Just let them do what they have to do. We'll figure it out." He shook his head. "No, Mum. I don't understand. What is this about? She's lying. You didn't do anything wrong." I could see his hands shaking, his whole body trembling with the emotional weight of the moment. He was torn, struggling between trusting me and trusting the truth that was now unraveling before him. "I'm not going anywhere," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "But we need to cooperate. It's the only way to get this over with." Daniel's eyes locked onto mine, filled with pain, confusion, and something else. Something I hadn't seen in him before. Fear. Fear that this would break us. The drive to the police station was a blur. I don't remember much of it. I could hear Daniel's voice in the back of my mind, his desperate cries to make sense of it all. But the words that Rebecca had planted in his head were like poison, twisting his perception of everything. She had manipulated him once before, and now she was doing it again. When we arrived at the station, they led me into a small room, cold, sterile room, and I could feel the walls closing in. I had been here before, in a different life, in a different time. But it felt even darker now. Rebecca's accusation loomed over me, and I didn't know how to fight it. The officer sat across from me, his expression unreadable. "You're here to answer questions regarding an old report of child abduction," he said, flipping through a few pages on his desk. "We have reason to believe that you've been hiding your son's past from him, and that you've been keeping him from his biological mother." I stared at him, my heart pounding. The truth was out there, but how could I explain it? How could I make him see that this wasn't what it seemed? "She's lying," I said quietly. "Rebecca is lying. She's manipulating everything." The officer didn't respond right away. He just kept his eyes on me, watching, waiting. "Your son has told us that you have been hiding the truth from him about his father. Is that true?" I nodded slowly, the words catching in my throat. "Yes," I said softly. "I didn't want him to know. I didn't want him to live with the burden of his father's violence. But I didn't take him away from her. I didn't steal him. I protected him." "And what about the claim that you manipulated him into thinking his biological mother didn't care about him?" he asked, leaning forward. "Is that true?" "No," I said firmly. "That's a lie. Rebecca abandoned him. She left him to be raised by a man who could barely take care of himself. I took him in because no one else would. I gave him a life he never would have had if she had kept him." The officer sat back, his expression unreadable. "And you didn't tell him any of this?" "No," I admitted. "I thought I was protecting him. I didn't want him to know about the violence, the abuse, the things that had happened before I found him. I thought it would be better if he didn't know." The officer sighed, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "You realize, don't you, that this could all be construed as keeping him from his biological mother? Legally speaking, that's kidnapping." I felt my stomach drop. "Kidnapping?" I whispered. No, that's not what happened." The officer's eyes softened, just a fraction, but there was no mercy in them. "We'll see what the investigation brings, but I suggest you prepare yourself for some difficult questions." When the questioning was over, they let me go, but Daniel had to stay. He was being questioned separately. The officer wanted to hear his side of things without me there to influence him. I could see the fear in Daniel's eyes when they led him away. The guilt in my heart was unbearable. I had never meant for him to be caught in this storm. I had never imagined it would get this far. I sat in the small, cold waiting room, my head spinning. I tried to focus on something, anything, but all I could hear was Rebecca's voice echoing in my mind. "You'll never escape what you are." I tried to push it out of my head, but it lingered, a poison that had been planted deep in my soul. She had gotten to Daniel. She had twisted him into something that hurt him. And now I was paying the price. After what felt like hours, the door opened. It was Daniel. His face was pale, his eyes red from crying, but there was something else in them. Something different. I stood up, my heart in my throat. "Daniel!" He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at me, his hands shaking as he walked toward me. And then, just as I reached out for him, he collapsed into my arms, his body shaking with sobs. "Mom, I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't mean to. I didn't want to hurt you." I held him tightly, my own tears falling freely now. "It's okay, Danny. It's okay. I'm here. I'm always here." He clung to me, his grip tight, as though he was afraid he might lose me again. "I don't know what to believe anymore, Mom," he said, his voice breaking. "I don't know what's real." I stroked his hair, whispering words of comfort, but in my heart, I knew that the road ahead would be long. The wounds were deep, and the scars would take time to heal. But for the first time in days, I felt like we had a chance to rebuild, even if it would take time, effort, and a whole lot of love. We walked out of the police station together, the weight of the world still pressing down on us, but something had shifted. Daniel had started to accept the truth, and maybe, just maybe, I had started to forgive myself. But as we left the station and got into the car, I knew this wasn't over. Rebecca hadn't finished with us yet. The truth was out, but the battle was far from over. There was still so much to face. And I had no idea where it would lead. The sound of the police siren still echoed in my ears, long after the flashing lights faded into the distance. I had never thought I would end up here, at the mercy of the law, facing consequences for things I never intended. But here we were, trapped in a web of lies and twisted truths, a game Rebecca had set in motion long ago. Daniel sat beside me in the car, his silence heavier than the weight of the world. We had just left the police station, and though they hadn't arrested me yet, the investigation was ongoing. And I could see in Daniel's eyes that he was torn between defending me and questioning everything he thought he knew. We drove in silence, the city lights flashing outside the window, but inside the car, all I could hear was the thudding of my own heart. Daniel's pain was still raw, and I knew the wounds from our confrontation with Rebecca hadn't healed. He still wasn't sure what to believe, still wasn't sure if the truth I had given him was enough to patch up the broken pieces of his past. "Mom," Daniel finally spoke, his voice a mixture of exhaustion and confusion. "Do you think we can fix this? Fix everything?" I glanced at him. His face was pale, but his eyes, there was a spark of determination in them. The same spark I had seen in him when he was just a boy, before everything went wrong. "I don't know," I whispered. "I don't know how to fix this. But I do know one thing. I'll never stop fighting for you." Daniel turned to me then, his eyes softening with a mix of gratitude and sadness. "I just don't want to lose you again, Mom." I reached out and took his hand, squeezing it tightly. "You won't. No matter what happens, I'm here. And I always will be." But even as I said those words, a cold feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. Rebecca had already played her cards, and now it was my turn. I couldn't let her win. I couldn't let her tear us apart, not again. The next morning everything changed. I woke up to the sound of my phone ringing, and my heart sank when I saw the number on the screen. It was the police. "Hello," I answered, my voice shaky. "Ms. Daniels." The officer's voice was calm but firm. "We need you to come down to the station. We've received new evidence regarding the case, and we need to talk to you." New evidence? My mind raced. What new evidence? What had Rebecca found now? I glanced over at Daniel, still sleeping peacefully in the other room, and I felt a pang of guilt. I couldn't let him get pulled further into this. I had already kept so much from him, and now I had to face whatever Rebecca was planning. I had to end this, once and for all. At the police station, I was escorted into the same cold room where I had been interrogated days before. This time, though, the atmosphere was heavier. The officer sitting across from me didn't waste any time. "Ms. Daniels," he began, "we've received a new statement from your son, Daniel." My heart skipped a beat. A statement from Daniel. Why would he give them a statement? "He claims," the officer continued, "that he no longer believes your version of events. He says that Rebecca's story matches his memories more closely than yours. He's requested a formal investigation into the claim of child abduction." I felt the blood drain from my face. Daniel. He had sided with Rebecca. But I couldn't lose my composure. Not now. "Daniel doesn't understand everything yet," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "He's still processing the truth. But he will. He has to understand." The officer nodded. "We're aware of that, Ms. Daniels. But we have to follow the law. If your son insists on pressing charges, we have no choice but to investigate further. This could lead to more serious consequences." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. The officer was right. The investigation was no longer just about finding the truth. It was now about proving my innocence in a system that was designed to protect the guilty as much as the innocent. And in Rebecca's eyes, I was guilty. Is there any way we can resolve this without escalating it further? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. We'll see what your son decides, the officer replied. But for now, I need you to sign this release form, allowing us to access further information. It's standard procedure. I signed the paper without hesitation, the weight of what was happening sinking deeper into my chest. When I got home, I found Daniel sitting at the kitchen table, his face buried in his hands. The sight of him like that made my heart ache. My son, the boy I had loved and raised, now caught between two versions of the truth. Danny, I said softly, walking over to him. He looked up, his eyes red and swollen. Mom, I don't know what to do. I just can't keep this up. I can't pretend everything's okay anymore. I knelt beside him, my heart breaking for him all over again. I know it's hard, sweetheart. I know it feels like the ground is shifting beneath your feet, but you have to trust me. Trust what we've built together. His eyes filled with tears. But she's my mother too, Mom. I don't know who to believe anymore. She made me feel like you were the one who kept me from her. And now, his voice cracked. Now it feels like I'm losing you. I put my arms around him, pulling him close. You're not losing me, Danny. No matter what happens, you're not losing me. His sobs filled the room, and I held him tighter, whispering that everything would be okay. But in the back of my mind, I knew that everything was far from okay. Rebecca had planted a seed of doubt in his heart, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't erase it. The next few days were a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and constant worry. The police had started their investigation in earnest, and they were questioning everyone involved. Neighbors, friends, anyone who might have seen something or heard something that could prove Rebecca's story. But there was something else. Something new that had come to light. Rebecca wasn't just accusing me of stealing Daniel away. She was accusing me of something worse. She had found a way to twist the narrative, to paint herself as the victim and me as the villain. And now, the charges she was pressing against me were more than just abduction. She had added claims of coercion, of manipulation, of making Daniel feel like he had no choice but to stay with me. The lie was growing, and it was more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. Daniel and I didn't speak much in the following days. There were moments where I thought he might come to me, where I hoped he might finally understand. But then he would pull away, retreating into his room, lost in his thoughts. I was lost in my guilt. Couldn't fix this. Not by myself. But then the phone rang again. It was the officer. Ms. Daniels, we have the results of the investigation, he said, his voice grim. We need to meet with you. It's about Daniel. The words echoed in my mind, each one like a hammer to my chest. It was over. It was all over. I knew it then. I had known deep down that this moment was coming. The moment when the truth would be laid bare. But I wasn't ready for it. I wasn't ready to see my son caught in this storm. I couldn't lose him. I couldn't lose everything. I arrived at the police station, my hand shaking so badly that I could barely hold the steering wheel. Daniel had barely spoken to me since the investigation began. He had been holed up in his room, lost in thought, struggling with what he thought he had to do. He had been caught in a web of lies, and now the truth was about to shatter everything. The officer led me into the same sterile room where I had sat countless times before. This time the room felt colder, more suffocating. The officer didn't waste time. He placed a file in front of me, thick with paperwork. Here's the report, he said, his voice low. It's clear that your son's testimony has changed the course of the investigation. I couldn't breathe. Daniel's testimony. What had he said? What had he done? The officer continued, his gaze fixed on me. He's chosen to press charges against you. The investigation found enough evidence to suggest that you misled him about his father's past. My heart dropped. Well, this couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. I don't understand, I whispered, my voice barely audible. What did he say? What did he tell you? The officer hesitated for a moment, then spoke again, softer now. He told us that he believed you had kept the truth from him, not just about his biological mother, but about everything. The abuse. His father's past. He said he felt manipulated into thinking that he was better off without her, without knowing what really happened. I sat there frozen. The words were like poison seeping into my veins. This wasn't what I had wanted. This wasn't how I had planned to protect him. The officer paused, his eyes softening just a bit. But Ms. Daniels, there's more. Your son has also expressed regret. He's confessed that he didn't fully understand the full extent of the situation. And he's reconsidering his stance. What does that mean? I asked, my voice shaking. What's happening? The officer stood up and motioned for me to follow him. We've called him in. He wants to speak to you. When I walked into the room where Daniel was waiting, I could barely recognize him. His eyes were red and swollen, his face drawn with exhaustion. He had been through so much, and yet, there was a sense of guilt in his eyes that I could not shake. I sat down beside him, my hands trembling as I reached out to him. Danny, I whispered. What did you tell them? What did you say? He looked at me, his expression softening as if he could barely look me in the eye. I didn't know what to think, Mom. I was so angry. I thought I could trust Rebecca. But the more I heard her story, the more I started to question everything. I thought, maybe you had kept me from her because she really cared. I shook my head, my heart breaking. She never cared, Danny. Not in the way you think. She abandoned you, left you to fend for yourself. He swallowed hard, his hands clenched tightly. I know now. I can't believe I ever thought I could trust her. But I still feel so lost. I don't know where I belong anymore. I pulled him into my arms, holding him tightly. You belong with me, Danny. You've always belonged with me. I'm sorry I kept the truth from you. But I did it because I wanted to protect you. I wanted you to grow up without the weight of that darkness on your shoulders. I understand now, he said softly, his voice breaking. But it still hurts. Hurt you. And I don't know how to fix it. You don't have to fix anything, I said, my voice thick with emotion. We'll fix it together. We've always been a team, Danny. And we always will be. He pulled back, looking at me with teary eyes. But what about the charges? What about what I told the police? I don't know, I whispered, feeling a lump form in my throat. But we'll figure it out. One step at a time. A few days later, the charges were dropped. It was unexpected. The officer called me, telling me that the investigation had concluded, and while Daniel's testimony had been a significant part of it, there was no criminal case against me. Rebecca's lies had been exposed, but her grip on Daniel had already done its damage. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or heartbroken. The following weeks were difficult. There were still scars, deep scars. But slowly Daniel and I began to rebuild. There were no quick fixes, no immediate solutions. But each day we took small steps toward healing. I never expected this journey to be easy. I never expected the consequences of Rebecca's lies to leave such deep marks on us. But we were stronger for it. We had faced the truth together, and although it had torn us apart for a while, it had also brought us closer. I looked at Daniel one evening, as we sat on the porch together, watching the sun set. You know, he said quietly, I still don't know everything. I still don't have all the answers. But I do know one thing. What's that? Asked, my voice soft. That I'm not alone. That no matter what, you'll always be there. and that, even after everything, we can make it through. I smiled, tears in my eyes. We always will, Danny. We always will. Did this story leave you on the edge of your seat? Subscribe now for more heart-wrenching, suspenseful, and emotional stories that will keep you hooked. Don't miss out on the twists, the drama, and the real emotions that unfold in each episode. Hit the bell icon to be the first to know when the next video drops. You won't want to miss what happens next. Join the conversation in the comments below. We want to hear your thoughts, theories, and reactions. Let's keep the discussion going. And don't forget to check out more videos from our channel for endless entertainment. Whether you're in the mood for drama, thrillers, or emotional journeys, we've got something for everyone.